deciding whether he's going to continue to fight on because of an ICC indictment. There are many other reasons. The ICC doesn't have that type of power. But by principle, by saying clearly that international justice requires accountability for these atrocities, that's the principle that we have to
I can already see Mohammed shaking his head, so I want to bring him into the discussion now.
Yes, but that has already happened. I mean, Colonel Gaddafi has been bombed by America, has been called a mad dog. There were sanctions against him. The whole world saw his atrocities in Lockerbie, in St. James Square, and still they embraced him.
Okay.
Tony Blair shook hands with him. Condoleezza Rice went to visit him in his tent. So the political position is hypocritical anyway.
All right, Mohammed, you made that point very briefly. Mark, can you respond to that point very briefly now?
If there was a process at that time, which it would not have been under the ICC because it was not relevant at that time, but had international justice existed at that time where they could have indicted Colonel Gaddafi back then for the atrocities committed, I'm not sure we would be here right now discussing this, because I think Gaddafi would have been dealt with. Right. That was the missing link.
Okay, I'm trying to shift gears a little bit. Mohammed, if we talk about principles of justice, as Mark is doing it, should we also talk about accountability of perhaps other countries, not only Muammar Gaddafi and his circle? I mean, some say when you have plane loads of mercenaries taking off from African states heading for Libya, somebody in those African countries must know about this and must be complicit in it somehow.
I'd love to believe that, but Tony Blair, for example, said about Saddam Hussein, never again will we allow such a thing. And they did. And frankly speaking, politics, and that's why I think Colonel Gaddafi does not really believe the West, because he knows that he has been able to manipulate it before, and he thinks that he can do it again. And therefore, yes, I would like to see the world stand on values, on moral issues, rather than on politics. I'd like to see that, definitely, and I would like to see it extend to everywhere else in the world, and not just by picking and choosing.
Sammy, do you think it would be more effective if the ICC perhaps took some action against mercenaries, and that might discourage what seems to be one of the few elements which are still backing Muammar al-Gaddafi in these alleged human rights abuses?
I mean, that would be one thing. And I mean, I don't want to be seen as saying that the ICC investigations is wrong. That's definitely a step, but the issue is the effectiveness. And the issue is that we could be working on investigation, but we can also be working on this channels of exile. And also the fact that at the end of the day, the international community, with the US at its helm, basically, is trying to capitalize on this moment. And they've been delegitimizing the UN and the international system all this time, and now they're trying to pick up and appear as the saviors of the Libyan people. And the Libyan people are working really hard to try to free their own country. And this is the first time in a long time, if ever, that you have a people's movement without a vanguard working to remove their leader and their regime. And then on the other hand, you have the international community that's reacting in the same kind of tired ways that we've already delegitimized time and again. And so you have the arms embargo, but you don't have a look at at our own weapons manufacturers, for example. And you have we're trying to control Libya, but we're not trying to control the African countries around it, for example. And the US isn't the only one. I pick them as because they're the biggest sort of example. But Russia stands to lose about $4 billion from these arms deals, so they have an interest as well.
Well, that's an interesting point. If we could bring Mark into the discussion, I mean, how far could accountability go? Could we see some of the major powers, arms sellers, also be accountable if we really want to get into who's responsible for human rights abuses? And many of them were selling weapons up until very recently, a matter of days ago, weren't they?
Well, absolutely. In relation to the crime that the prosecutor is looking at, crimes against humanity, if you're able to establish that there were other countries engaged, for instance, in providing arms, and there was knowledge that these arms were being used as part of this campaign against civilians, then absolutely under international law, those individuals or even governments, other governments, could be held complicit and responsible.
But hang on, Mark. I mean, that's maybe in principle, but no one really expects that you're going to see some accountability on the part of the very powers in the Security Council that referred this to the ICC.
Well, absolutely. Let's make clear right now that the development of international criminal law, and as important as the creation of the International Criminal Court was, there are still significant gaps. And those gaps include the fact that some of the major powers on the Security Council, the United States, for instance, Russia, China, are not signatories to the International Criminal Court, and therefore many people, including myself, argue that they find themselves outside the parameters of accountability. So there's no question. I can't even argue that, because that is one of the gaps. But I think we're moving in a direction where we're making it quite clear that international justice matters, and those individuals or countries that are involved with committing these crimes need to be brought to justice. That's why I'm not a proponent of suggesting that you can put some of these individuals in exile. That's not the direction international criminal law has been moving in the last 30 years, and I don't want to see us moving back to where it was 50 years ago, where you were providing impunity for individuals that were committing these crimes.
All right, Mohammed, briefly on this point, what happens if revolutionaries win and they decide they'd like to try them at home, as was the case perhaps with people like Saddam?
We'd love nothing more than this. We would love, as Libyans, to get hold of Colonel Gaddafi and put him on trial. But I think Colonel Gaddafi is too deep into this and too deep with international politics that I don't think that he would give up on the one hand, or that he would be allowed to be caught by the Libyan people. I think someone will kill him, or he will kill himself.
All right, I guess time will tell how this saga is going to develop and end. We'll have to thank our guests for joining us. Mohammed Abdelmalek, chairman of Libya Watch. Yes. From Oxford, Sami Hermes, a visiting fellow at St Anthony's College at Oxford University. And again from London, Mark Ellis, executive director of the International Bar Association. Thank you all, gentlemen, for joining us. And thank you so much for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. As always, we welcome your comments and suggestions. Feel free to email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. For now, it's goodbye.
To be part of the success of one of the world's most attractive countries for FDI, please push the button. For more power to your global business, invest in Turkey.
The relocation of the Ahmadiyya has magnified the issue of religious intolerance in Indonesia. Is this inevitable in a multicultural society? And is the government turning a blind eye? 101 East at this time on Al Jazeera.